She could clearly see how large the harvest was. I see. Very well, I will prepare a carriage for you. That won't be necessary, sir. A little bird told me that Master Rikusen will be going for an inspection soon. I thought I might be able to travel with him. The specific species of little bird was the quack doctor who had happened to overhear it from somewhere. Maomao had confirmed the rumor with Chu. Rikusen, yes, sir. There is a great deal I would like to talk with him about. I thought it might be a good opportunity. She had not seen Rikusen again after that first day in the western capital. She needed to talk to him personally. Jinshi looked briefly conflicted, but then he said, all right. I will inform Rikusen that you will be coming. Thank you very much, sir. There was one other thing she wanted to do on this trip. She wanted to gather medicinal herbs from the plains along the way. Some of her specimens from the previous trip had yielded promising results. She had better hurry and get a basket to put them in. If you don't mind, Master Jinshi, I have to be going. Hey, Jinshi looked like he wanted to say something else, but Maomao ignored him. She trotted off, practically skipping away to get everything ready. A few days later, Maomao left for the farming village. My, what wonderful weather we're having, Chu said with a big stretch. These days it seemed that Chu tagged along wherever Maomao went. I guess I didn't have to worry about rain after all. She leaned out of the carriage for a good look. The weather was indeed lovely. Maomao caught the scent of grass on the breeze as she let the rattling carriage carry her along. The weather should be clear for a while yet. Outside of the rainy season, Ise province doesn't get any precipitation worth mentioning, said Rikusen, who sat in the seat across from them. He wore an outfit that would be easy to move in, appropriate for visiting a farming village. Sounds perfect for a wheat harvest, Chu said. If rain fell during the harvest, the wheat could start to sprout. This would make it lower quality, and if it could not be properly dried, it might simply rot. It is true. The weather can be fickle, though. I have even heard of hailstorms occurring around harvest time. Hail can be awfully difficult to predict, can't it? Maomao said. She was no farming expert. Such sympathetic but innocuous interjections were the most she could hope to offer. If Lahan's brother had been here, he would probably have been clenching his fist and expounding on the manifold labors of the harvest season. Maomao glanced toward the driver's bench. Basin was holding the reins. Lihaku would have been just as good for a guard, but since Basin had accompanied them last time, he did so again now. His duck was there too. She was practically their mascot at this point. Maomao looked at Rikusen. What caused you to want to survey the farming villages, Rikusen? She asked. This was the question she had wanted to address to him personally. She suspected Jinshi had already given her the answer indirectly, but she wanted to hear it from Rikusen's own mouth. Rikusen glanced around, and Maomao thought his look at his subordinates following the carriage was particularly long. Then he said, there are several reasons. Which would you like to hear, Maomao? As she had requested, he addressed her with no honorific or title. He had been altogether too respectful toward her in the past. Chu seemed intrigued that they spoke in such familiar terms. All of them, she said firmly. Very well. The first has to do with insect plagues. I happen to be in contact with Sir Lahan, and I frequently lean on his knowledge and expertise. He warned me that if there were to be a plague in Li, it would likely come either from the north or from the breadbasket to the west. Indeed, a small-scale plague of locusts had broken out in the fertile regions to the northwest the year before. The terrifying thing about these insects was that, if left alone, they would wreak ever more destruction. For reasons I won't pretend to know, I was given the honor of being posted here to the western capital, where I am treated essentially as a bureaucrat. The polite term for what I do might be secretarial work, but less favorably, I could be called an errand boy. Some of the paperwork I deal with just happens to be about harvests, so I took an incidental interest in the availability of stores and provisions. Do you really need to go visit in person, though? That is the second reason. Rikusen held up 2 fingers. Maomao's eyes widened. She wasn't sure what he could mean. Rikusen smiled, almost apologetically. I think you may be aware of this already, that the numbers in the reports regularly fail to line up with the actual amounts. Was he talking about the attempts to fudge the production quantities? Such things did indeed seem to be going on in the farming villages. What is the third reason, then? Rikusen had said he had several reasons, and Maomao didn't think just 2 would qualify as several. The third reason, his mouth sat open for just a beat. Then he said, a long time ago I heard about a special form of cultivation. It would decrease the number of pest insects. You mean fall ploughing? So that's why you spoke to Nyanjan, that's right. Do you see now? Rikusen's smile was gentle. Maomao thought he looked thinner than the last time she'd seen him. Who told you about fall ploughing? Maomao asked. My mother and my older sister. My mother was a merchant who engaged in trade far and wide, and my sister helped her. I learned quite a bit from them in my younger days. Rikusen looked out the window of the carriage, but he didn't seem to be taking in the scenery. That makes sense, said Maomao. What else do I need to ask? She spent long enough thinking about it that they arrived at the village, the carriage rattling as it slowed. Maomao stuck her head out the window. Wheat shimmered golden in the fields. It looked like a rich harvest. She saw green leaves too, which suggested the villagers had planted potatoes. All right. Shall we dedicate ourselves to farm work for a while? Herb collecting could come on the way home. Maomao had just hopped out of the carriage, sprightly and ready to go, when she saw a fast rider coming up behind. That wasn't so remarkable in itself, but the man's look clearly indicated something was wrong. Maybe he was attacked by bandits. No, that wasn't it. The horse stopped in front of Maomao and her party, its tongue lolling from its mouth as it listed to one side. Its rider wore the uniform of a soldier. I think I recognize him. He was one of the guards who frequently attended Jinshi. That would suggest he was of a fair rank, so what was he doing running himself ragged catching up with them? What's going on? Maomao asked. She held out water, but the man shook his head. His mouth worked open and shut. He didn't say a word but gave her a piece of paper. The heck! The paper, folded as small as possible, seemed to be a letter from Lahan's brother, the Moon Prince. He said if you saw this you would understand. Understand what? Maomao wondered. Perplexed, she opened the letter. A single line ran down the page. It wasn't even drawn with a brush. It looked messy, like Lahan's brother had used a piece of charcoal as an improvised writing instrument. But that wasn't all. The line had been violently scratched out again. The letter didn't even say where it was from, but there was no mistaking who had sent it. Lahan's brother had needed to tell them something so badly that he had found time in the midst of some sort of chaos to send a pigeon with this message. I know what this is, Maomao thought. She realized she recognized the dark scribbles. They resembled the picture that the girl Jazgul had given her the year before, after the visit of the Sheahinese shrine maiden. Maomao hadn't understood what it meant then, but I do now. The line was the horizon that spread out before her, and the blot was a dark cloud. She looked at the sky, still clear and blue, and said, "They're coming." Chapter 17, Disaster Part 1. What? A plague of insects, a villager said, sounding exasperated. Maomao had immediately requested the headman to gather the farmers. So many people were packed into the meeting place that it was almost hard to breathe. Yes, it will be here soon, within days. Maomao said, desperate. The villagers only laughed. Yeah, okay, there were some bugs last year, but look at the windfall this year. Everything's fine, he's right. The weather will be fine for a while yet. There's no need to trip all over ourselves getting the harvest in, said someone else. Then, however, someone in the group growled, you lazy bastards. We'll never make it in time with that attitude. Nyanjan, Maomao said. It was the old one-eyed man who had lived through a plague of insects so terrible that people had resorted to cannibalism. He made no attempt to hide his anger with the villagers and their blase attitude. He slammed the table with his right hand, the one that lacked a pointer finger. You lot wouldn't know because you won't listen. Nothing can save you now. I am going out there and I'm going to start harvesting this minute. Is it really as important as all that, Nyanjan? The headman asked. In a village full of very newly minted farmers, the former serf was the oldest and most experienced of them all. Even the headman couldn't dismiss him out of hand. I haven't had my lunch yet, headman. Do you think I could go grab a bite? Asked one of the villagers, sounding entirely unconcerned. Thank goodness Basin isn't here. They had made him wait outside, knowing that anywhere Basin went, his duck was sure to follow. A quick glance confirmed that the duck was there, playing with the local kids. Maomao was convinced that talk was futile. They should be spending this time getting started on the harvest. Just as she was really starting to fret about what to do, Rikusen stepped forward. Perhaps you would help if you felt there was something in it for you. He gave them that pretty boy smile. We'll buy your grain, at twice the market price. There was a heavy, jangly thump as Rikusen dropped a bag onto the table. It was obviously stuffed with money, easily more than a farmer would make in a year. The villagers were immediately riveted on it. You mean it? We're gonna hold you to that, you know. Their eyes were feral. Yes, but only whatever is in excess of your taxes. Furthermore, it only applies to whatever you can gather in the next 3 days. Rikusen's gentle tone never faltered, but what he was asking for was impossible. And yet the fire that sparked in the villagers' eyes never went out. That's the power of cold, hard cash, Maomao thought. The villagers streamed out of the meeting place and got to work. They went back home and gave sickles to their wives, their children, their elderly family members. Once they were alone in the hall, Maomao turned to Rikusen. Are you sure about this? Are you even at liberty to make a promise like that? If there is a plague of locusts, then grain will fetch far more than twice the average price and we'll come out ahead. If there's no plague, well, I won't have any complaints about that. Is there a problem here? No, none at all. She should have expected him to be quick when it came to calculations like this. He said his mother was a merchant. Even more tellingly, he was on good terms with Lahan. Chu was apparently inspired by what Rikusen had done and was looking highly motivated. Are we going to work too? I think I'll help in Mr. Nyanjan's field. What about you, Miss Maomao? Me, I think I'll get ready to help make food, and I'll make pesticide too. She flipped through the encyclopedia of herbs Jinchi had given her, looking for anything that might help kill bugs. She had some misgivings about producing pesticides right next to the food they were going to hand out for people to eat, but desperate times called for desperate measures. Maomao was virtually certain the plague would occur. The only question was when. Where was Lahan's brother last? He'd been about to begin the return leg toward the western capital, but he was still deep in the western reaches of Isei province. He'd encountered a swarm of grasshoppers there, and had managed to dash off his message and get the pigeon in the air before the bugs were upon them, but he didn't have time to find proper writing utensils. The situation was clearly desperate. The grasshoppers had already begun carving their swath of destruction. They would likely move east toward the western capital, eating everything in their path. It has started now. There is no delaying it any longer. The only questions were how to bring this to an end and what that would entail. First, they had to save as much grain from the ravenous insects as they could. They needed to harvest it, get it inside, and make sure the storehouses were shut up tightly so not a single grasshopper could get in. Now the challenge began. She did not have to find the best solution. She just had to keep looking for a better one. The villagers were in the fields harvesting grain as fast as they could. I worry whether it will rot. Normally, grain would be allowed to sit outside for several days to dry. But what should they do here? More than anything, they needed places to store the harvest. All right enough. If I am going to think, I need to work while I do it. Maomao borrowed a stove and began making a huge pot of soup. She wished she could make it with some nice, astringent soy paste, her personal preference, but she suspected it might not be to the villagers' tastes. Instead, she fried up some vegetables in oil, put plenty of salt on them to give them some flavor, and then added them to a stew of milk and dried meat. The ironic thing is, people from the central region would turn up their noses at too much milk. She added some fragrant herbs to make it less pungent, a bit of flour to thicken it, and she started to think she might have a winner on her hands. Wish I could do some dumplings, but I think we had better not. Instead, she would get fried bread for the enter. Maomao poured the soup into bowls and put the bowls on a tray, then zipped around handing them out to the workers. Miss Maomao, Miss Maomao. One for Miss Chu, please. Chu flounced up to her. She had practically transformed herself into one of the villagers. She carried a knife in her right hand and a sack in her left. The sack was full of ears of grain. Maomao gave Chu some stew. You are only taking the ears of grain? She asked. It was Mr. Nyanjan's idea. He said if the harvest was the only important thing, it would be faster to collect just the ears. Yes, that certainly would be faster than having to bend over and cut down every stalk. Maomao and Chu sat down on a nearby fence to enjoy their meal. Maomao had already eaten her stew, so she munched on some bread. There won't be time to dry everything, and it won't fit inside if the stems are still on, Chu said. Good point. Wheat straw was used as livestock feed and for daily necessities like reed mats. It was an important secondary product, but right now there were more important things to focus on. Oh me, oh my, but money is a powerful thing, isn't it? All we had to do was whisper in their ears the straw can come later, and look, the villagers immediately traded their sickles for small knives. The children went from field to house dragging bags full of ears of grain. Now they're drying them inside because the ears would fly away in the wind out here. You're quite good at getting your way, aren't you, Miss Chu? Oh yes, you should see how I motivate my husband on nights when he's not in the mood. Maomao had a thought. Perhaps her brothel humour, which so frequently fell flat, would land with Chu. Sadly, no really good jokes came to mind at that moment. She finished the last of her modest meal, vowing to work up a routine she could share. Rikusen had been exactly right to tell the people they had 3 days to collect the grain. With a firm deadline in place, everyone busied themselves thinking of ways to harvest more efficiently. By the second day, more than half the grain had been taken in. Basin, with his immense strength, proved his worth now. He could carry a full bag of grain in each hand, doing what would otherwise require several full-grown adults. However, more delicate work always eluded him. "Oh no, what are you doing? You are hopeless, little brother-in-law," Chu cried. Basin, trying to repair a house, had only ended up doing more damage, making himself a target for more teasing from Chu. "We can't have the storehouses full of holes," Maomao thought. She was patching a house with mud and clay. Wood was precious in this part of the country, so earth would have to do. "I think we were just in time," Rikusen said, looking up at the sky. Maomao looked too and saw a small black cloud beyond the hills. "Isn't it a little early for the rainy season?" she asked. Yes, it is." Rikusen looked pained. A cloud at this time of year is rather troubling. That sounded very ominous, but Maomao wasn't sure exactly what he meant. "What's that about the clouds?" Basin asked as he passed by, lugging a couple bulging sacks of grain as if they weighed nothing at all. "I merely meant that it's not a good thing to see a rain cloud at this time of year," Rikusen said, pointing to the sky to the east. "I hear you. There's another cloud over there. Is that a bad sign too?" Rikusen looked around. Basin was pointing in the opposite direction. "I'm afraid I don't see anything." He, my little brother's eyes are hopelessly good," Chu broke in. "Regular folk might like to have a telescope on hand though." Even Chu didn't appear to carry one of those because she leaned forward and squinted. Maomao joined her, narrowing her eyes and peering toward the western sky. Clouds, she thought she heard a faint buzz. Then she saw some black specks that wavered in the air. They didn't look like any rain cloud she'd ever seen. Miss Maomao, Miss Chu. The two of them looked at each other and nodded. Maomao grabbed the soup pot and a pestle lying nearby and banged them together. She raced through the village, crying, "Grasshoppers! The bugs are on their way." Chu found some men sitting around drinking tea and gave them each a smart smack. "You heard her. Grasshoppers incoming." They had to do anything they could to light a fire under these villagers. Panic would solve nothing, but at that moment they needed everyone to give everything they had. Chapter 18, Disaster Part 2. The first one came when about 70% of the harvest had been brought in. It was darker than an ordinary grasshopper, and it had longer legs. Somebody crushed and killed it. Someone else shouted not to bother, saying they had to keep harvesting. Torches were lit. It would barely be a drop in this ocean, but it was something. The women and children went into the houses and tried to cover any cracks with mud or cloth. The houses were dark inside, but they were sternly warned not to light any fires. They were also told to have food ready that could be eaten as is. They were ordered to kill any insects that got through the cracks. At Nainjan's house there was too much to fit, so they started storing grain in the shrine. There, the cracks were so packed with earth that hardly any air got in. Every house worthy of the name was sprinkled with pesticide, not that they knew whether it would do any good. The tents had too many openings to serve as storage areas. Instead, they would be temporary evacuation points for the villagers. Basin carried a huge net. It might once have been for catching fish, but he swung it around over his head with tremendous speed, gathering up grasshoppers within it. Then he dumped them in a huge bucket of water, killing them. Chu passed out leather pouches. Instead of food, they contained sweetened goat's milk. She was preparing for a long battle. Nainjan wore several overshirts, and the other villagers imitated him. Rikusen was going from house to house, reassuring the villagers whose anxious voices he could hear through the air holes. Any time he found bugs entering through a gap, he would crush the insects and fill the gap. The duck pecked at the grasshoppers and then spit them out again. They were perhaps inedible. Then the villagers started screaming. Everything seemed to grow darker, passing from bright and clear to ash, and then a grey that reminded Maomao of a rat. Soon, everything was practically black. It was impossible to open one's eyes, never mind walk. Bugs bumped into people and bit and tore at them. People could not open their mouths. They could only cover them with rags. Their layered overshirts were ripped and torn. The beating of wings drowned out every other sound. A droning noise overwhelmed everything, making it impossible to tell what someone else was saying. Soon, even the screams could not be heard anymore. Maomao covered her face with her hands, then opened her eyes slightly. She could see Basin still swinging the net over his head. It filled almost instantly. He then slammed it against the ground. The bucket had long ago overflowed with grasshoppers. One man had gone mad from the bug bites. He howled at the top of his lungs and swung a torch in one hand and a scythe in the other. It did him no good. The grasshoppers survived his counterattack and continued to assault the villagers. Chu crept up to the crazed man and swept his feet out from under him. She bound him with a rope the moment he was on the ground. Rikusen was still running from house to house, shouting. Some people were driven out of their minds by the disappearance of the light. Others were sane but simply could not hear him. Fire burst from one of the houses, and an elderly woman and some children came rushing out of the otherwise sealed structure. One of the kids held a flint. The freshly harvested wheat in the house was perfect fuel, and the fire burned readily. The parched air of the dry season made conditions even better for the flames. Basin reacted immediately, giving one of the posts of the house a kick. The place was barely more than a shack to begin with, and it promptly collapsed. Maomao could hear Basin shouting, although she could not catch the words. Maybe he was saying that the water source was too far away to fight the flames and they needed to destroy the house. He was in his element in moments of crisis. He had already practically knocked the place down on his own. Now he rushed over with the bucket full of floating grasshoppers and emptied it over the house.